Northeastwards across England and Wales tonight. Showers in Scotland with a low of 1 degree. Rain for most of the UK tomorrow, a high of 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Zora Suleiman.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 8:05 here on LBC. Welcome to Cross Question, LBC's weekly political panel debate show. It's where you can ask our panel a question on any political subject you like, or indeed any subject you like, I suppose, within reason. 0345 6060 973, that's the number to call. You can watch us on the LBC website, our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, or our Twitter feed. Let me introduce our panel for you. Catherine West is here from the Labour Party, Darren Grimes, the Brexit campaigner, Gillian Keegan from the Conservative Party, and Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, journalist and columnist for the iPaper.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Well, before we go to your calls, and remember that number, 0345 6060 973, let's get our panel's response to the breaking news over the last few minutes that the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Tom Watson, is standing down at the election. Catherine West, let's come to you.
Gobsmacked. I mean, Tom has been around ever since I've been involved in the Labour Party. So first thing to say, thank you, Tom, for all of your service to the Labour Party and to West Bromwich, and for doing the DCMS role and all of the work that Tom's done in terms of trying to reform the press issues, but also on, gambling and trying to reform that, and all the other things that he's done in Parliament. So, I'm very, very surprised.
He's clearly been out of sync with Jeremy Corbyn, and he hasn't hidden that, certainly over the last year or two. Presumably frustration may be at the root of this?
It's been a difficult couple of years, and I think anyone who reads the newspapers knows that. And obviously Jeremy and Tom are from very different wings of the party, but I always feel that in any movement, what you want to do is have senior people at the top who represent sort of the plethora of views within the party. So I think, Tom's obviously, got a lot of connections throughout the movement as well. So I think there'll be a lot of unhappy people tonight. Equally, I think from, I suppose, Jeremy's point of view, he'll be able to start afresh with somebody else who may be a little bit more in sync with him. And when you're actually in government, if we do go into government, then maybe somebody who's going to be, who perhaps just getting on a little bit better might be a good thing.
Somebody's just tweeted, Corbyn takeover nearing completion. There is a sense of that he was the final one sort of standing against the Corbyn tide. It really means that Jeremy Corbyn will now have complete control over the Labour Party, won't it?
Well, I'm sure Yasmin will agree with me that it'd be good to have a woman deputy while Jeremy's still the leader, and then possibly a woman leader afterwards. So I think any reshuffling of some faces. Are you putting yourself
forward, Catherine?
No, I'm not.
But also, I don't think you're right.
Yasmin.
The Jeremy brand is now the only brand, because if you think of Keir Starmer or even Emily Thornberry, they are very much their own people. And they will continue to say and do things that are probably not Jeremy's view. And I agree that it has to be a broad church. All the main parties have to be broader churches than they are at present.
But the impression that a lot of people get is that the left have now taken over the Labour Party in a way that hadn't necessarily been the case a few years ago.
Well, no, I think the left has. Of course, it's Jeremy Corbyn. They voted him in, But as I said, Keir Starmer is one of the leading voices of the Labour Party, and one of the best voices, frankly, who can persuade people who are not entirely convinced by Jeremy. I'm one of them. And so I think it's a mistake. The momentum wedge is there, and it is very ideological, and nobody can deny it. And of course, they're very active on social media. I think it would be a mistake to say that this is a kind of communist takeover or something.
I didn't use the
No.
word
I'm
communist.
saying that just wouldn't be the fair representation of the.
Gillian, Keegan, a formidable opponent, Tom Watson. I mean, he will. I mean, Tories, I think, quite secretly like Tom Watson because they like people who are a bit tribal, and Tom Watson is very tribal, isn't he?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's a secret that he was liked. I mean, you know, I've only been in Parliament 2.5 years, but even I've got to know him, and you know, he's fun actually. He's a great addition to Parliament. I'm sure there's many moderate Labour MPs who will be absolutely gutted actually, because he has been their hope in a way that you know, there is this sort of balance towards, you know, more moderate. It's funny that Tom Watson's become a moderate Labour person, because when I was growing up, he wasn't moderate. He was on the left wing of the party. Now he's, you know, he's kind of more moderate wing of the party. But I think there's a lot of people who saw him as the kind of leader of that, and even at some point possibly could even do a reverse takeover. So obviously that hope will be gone. I mean, he has done a lot in Parliament, and even in the last couple of years, as you say, Catherine, and he's been a great addition. He's also lost about half his body weight, which is amazing.
That's probably what he's going to do now.
Well, he could do.
Well, no, he said he is going to concentrate on campaigning on public health.
I think.
Darren Grimes, obviously a very vocal voice on the Remain side, one of the more powerful voices on the Remain side. Did you, as a Brexit campaigner, find him one of the more difficult opponents that you have?
It actually sticks in my jaw a little bit more, his whole nanny state stuff, you know, wanting to ban things left, right and centre was what annoyed me more than Brexit. But look, I'm conflicted on this actually, because part of me thinks I welcome the loonier left taking over the Labour Party. Hopefully the British people will be watching it and thinking, what on earth has happened? But also, what if these people get elected? You know, with the loony left completely in control of the Labour Party, Her Majesty's loyal opposition, or potential government. So I'm conflicted, to be honest.
So the loony right is okay, which is what we have at the
Who are
moment.
you saying's the loony
Boris
right?
Johnson.
Boris
Johnson is the loony right. Sorry,
He wants
the
an
idea that
amnesty
he
for
represents mainstream centrist stories is just nonsense.
An amnesty for immigrants who are here illegally. How is that?
He said that when he was
far
mayor.
right?
He never did it.
No, he said it in the leadership hustings, actually, that he wants to do it.
Let me see him do it.
Well, he's only been in power for,
No.
what is it, 100
Well, he was
days?
mayor. He didn't do it.
Well, vote
He
for
said
him,
it then.
Yasmin.
He didn't have the power to do it as mayor, as you well know. Well, I did think that this might be a
loony.
feisty programme between these two, and it started already. Catherine, let me come back to you just very quickly on this. What happens now? Because he is standing down as deputy leader. So does that mean? I mean, I don't know if you're an aficionado of the Labour Constitution, but does that mean
terrible on the rules?
Presumably, on the advent of an election,
Tom's very good on them.
Jeremy Corbyn will have to appoint a deputy leader, I would have thought.
Yes, so I think no, it's an election. Because
No,
do
but
you
it can't be
remember
now.
that
There has to be a deputy leader during
That's
the
right.
general election
It's true.
campaign.
So I'm not sure what will happen. Because
Maybe
you
the
couldn't have
NEC appoints somebody.
We couldn't have an internal election at the same time as the general election.
Well, I'm sure
and
that
yet
will.
you do need that function because, for example, you know, if we have any internal issues that need to be resolved, Tom obviously a key role on the NEC and so on. So, and also there are lots of women raring to go. Like Gillian, I came into Parliament sort of as an more experienced person and I'm just also thinking that maybe Tom just feels after 35 years if you come into politics very, very young, and I know Darren, you look very young to me, I think you have a different
He's older
view
than he looks.
when you suddenly get to a point where perhaps you have had a new sort of life given to you in a way because he looks so different from before and maybe you just think I could have a different life. So I think there's an element of finding
and
a
a
life
second
as well.
career, another career.
If anybody's listening who knows the Labour Party rule book inside out, do drop me a text 84850 and tell us what happens now. Is it Jeremy Corbyn who appoints a deputy? Is it the National Executive Committee? What happens? Because, I mean, normally, Catherine's right, there would be an election, but it's a bit late for that as we're heading into a general election. Right, we're going to go to your calls in a moment. 0345 6060 973. It's 14 minutes past 8.
This is LBC. Sheila Fogarty, Monday to Friday from 1 p.m.
I hear you, but why now?
Because nothing's getting done, Sheila.
Except it just has. We just, for the first time, got a positive vote in Parliament on a Brexit deal.
Yeah, but then the deal's going to be changed so much that it won't pass again.
That's not how you function in a Parliament. You let Parliament, voted in by you and me, address a piece of legislation and scrutinise it. You don't run scared of that scrutiny.
Sheila Fogarty,
With Blink, an Amazon company, helping give your family peace of mind.
LBC.
London, switch to Vodafone, the UK's best mobile network, and Be Unlimited, because the best phones deserve the best network and our new unlimited data plans. The future is exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
Max download speeds apply to unlimited data. Best network as voted by readers of trusted reviews. Terms at vodafone.co.uk/unlimited.
You're in leakage, you're in leak.
Tenna Men. Pants and pads. Buy online or in shops. Tenna Men. Keep control.
Christine from Hull was persuaded by Lloyds Bank to talk to a financial advisor and ended up making an investment which lost money. She asked Goodwin Barrett for help and received £6,900 in compensation. Christine is just one of the hundreds of people who Goodwin Barrett have helped. So if a bank or financial advisor persuaded you to make an investment which lost money, then text GOOD to 60777. Text GOOD to 60777 now.
Goodwin Barrett.
My name's Luke. I live in Dunstable with my wife and 4 daughters. We've got a Ring doorbell too out the front. Every time there's someone who comes up to the door, it notifies my phone, and then I can actually see if there's anyone dodgy at the door. A while ago, we had an incident at the house. My wife and I was in bed about 1:30 in the morning. We got a notification on my Ring app on my phone. So I looked on the actual video itself, and it showed me that he was trying to get underneath the mat to see if there was a key there so he can actually get into the house. The video clip allowed the police to see exactly who was in front of the camera and where that person was touching the door, and that allowed the crime scene technician to dust for prints. Thanks to the video clip and his fingerprints, that was enough to convict him. The most important thing for me is when I'm not here during the night, I need to know that the family's safe, and Ring Doorbell does that.
Join Luke and the millions of people protecting their homes with Ring. Learn more at ring.com.
High quality, affordable kitchens designed in your own home. That's Room Sense.
That's Room Sense.
Book your free Room Sense home design visit and we'll measure up, show you samples, create a stunning kitchen design and give you a quote all before we leave.
Quality at a price you can afford. That's Room Sense.
Book today at roomsense.co.uk.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
17 minutes past 8. Catherine West is here from the Labour Party. Darren Grimes, Brexit campaigner. Gillian Keegan from the Conservative Party. And Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, journalist and commentator. Let's go to our first call. John is in Hornsey. Hello, John.
Hiya.
Hello, what's your question, please?
Yeah, with Brexit, do you think this is the start of the breakup of the UK since uncertain circumstances that we can't see ahead of us?
And are you more worried about Scotland or Northern Ireland or both?
Well, I think that the way things are going, it's gonna start. If Northern Ireland gets a certain deal, then Scotland's going to start. Then we're going to have Wales, and where does it end?
Okay, thank you very much, Yasmin.
There is this. I mean, there is a danger, and of course. I think the greatest danger is Scotland. I think, and it's not a danger. I think that's inevitable because the majority in Scotland, and I think I'm right, the majority in Northern Ireland, didn't want to leave the EU. But there's something quite interesting that I don't quite understand, but I think it's important, is the decision made by Sinn Féin with this election that they're stepping aside for some Remain.
I think it's where they think that the SDLP or maybe the Alliance Party could win a
unionist
seat.
in principle, aren't they?
No, the SDLP isn't unionist.
I thought it was a unionist candidates that they were supporting. It's not been very well reported.
I think it's where they think that if they fight against the other nationalist party, the SDLP, it splits the vote, and obviously they're both Remain parties. So that where they think the SDLP could win and then have a voice in Parliament, because of course Sinn Féin MPs don't come.
Which
to
I
Parliament.
think is scandalous, by the way. I think it's terrible that they have these seats and they're not doing the job.
And they get paid.
And they get paid. How is this allowed to go on and on and on as if nobody can question them? I find it extraordinary. Anyway, at that moment, I think there is a danger that this was England feels one way about the European Union, a small majority, but the other nations feel differently. Wales, though, I don't know, because it voted to leave, and it's now a lot of it is shifting. I don't know.
Well, Plaid is is going up, isn't it, in terms of elections? Whether it is as strong as the SNP, I don't know, but they're very Remainy as well. And also Wales did do quite well from EU funding, or does well from EU funding. So I think that there's a bit more of a recognition there about what the EU brings.
Would you care, though, if Scotland left?
That's a very good question. I would move. I think I'd like to live...
Well, you've said this before, and people keep saying to me, when you have Yasmin on...
Come on, stop it.
Well, you said it.
I know, because I never...
Don't you blame me.
No,
don't you blame me.
No, I'm blaming these people.
No, well, you just raised it yourself, so answer the question.
I
promised to move if Boris Johnson became Prime Minister.
If Scotland became independent and stayed in the EU... surely it would be very tempting, wouldn't it?
Well, you'd move to Scotland.
No, I'd love to, whether I could or not, and find a job there. But I think that is the thing, Scotland finding its own destiny. Yeah, it would. And listen, let's get this Boris thing straight. Yeah. I never thought that the Conservative Party, though not my party, would be so right-wing and so lose its marbles to elect this man as Prime Minister. I never thought it would happen. But it did.
But you count supporting Brexit as right-wing, do you?
No, I don't think so. There are quite a lot of people...
How is Boris Johnson right-wing?
Have you looked at all his policies over the years?
On social policy,
when he was mayor, when he was mayor, he was different. But since he went for this, everything he's said and done is just pound shop Farage. I'm sorry.
Well, we might come on to that a bit later, but let's stick with the subject of the question now. Darren Grimes, do you think that this could start the breakup of the union?
I actually think that the surest way to break up the union is to go ahead with Jeremy Corbyn's plan to have 2 referendums, actually, which was, if Nicola Sturgeon is the one who puts Jeremy Corbyn in power at the end of this general election, she has said that she will extract the maximum influence for Scotland. Now, she doesn't actually represent Scotland, I think she forgets. She's standing up for the Scottish National Party. Now, so she will put forward a referendum that Scotland, it's not clear the whole of Scotland actually wants a second referendum. They had one, let's not forget, only in 2014. So 2 referendums, one that could potentially break up our union, is part of the Corbyn manifesto now. I think that's the quickest way to break up our union.
If I could just clarify that, Ian, because obviously the Labour manifesto, as I think Darren knows, isn't out yet. But the concept is that there would be what we're calling give the people a say, put it to the people, hashtag put it to the people. Don't I sound cool?
No.
And then the idea is that those 2 options then sometime, but I also feel that that is where we're at as a country. And the second thing to say is on the Scottish national question, the Labour plan is to have a government where possibly we might need an occasional assistance from the Scottish National Party, but they wouldn't necessarily be in the government. And also post-2021, when the Scottish Parliamentary, their own Holyrood elections happen, we would get a feel for whether that is still something which the Scottish people want.
But won't we get that feel in this general election? Because all the polls show that the SNP are going to gain seats here. If they get over 50 of the 59 seats, that's a pretty good indication that Scottish people support their demand for a second referendum, isn't it?
I'm really interested in what's going to happen, because obviously I was in Parliament in 2015 and Alex Salmond was the big sort of mover and shaker. And then obviously since he's gone, it does have a different feel, the SNP. They did lose some seats to both Tory and Labour, and I think it's too early in this election to say, they still do very well, I'm sure, because you can't go from being that big a group in Parliament to 0. But I do feel that it's too early to say, and they do speak themselves of the Corbyn surge back in 2017. They do remember suddenly something twigged, and so I think it's a bit too early to say.
What do you make of the fact that John McDonnell in particular has shown a bit of ankle to the SNP? He did it on stage with me in Edinburgh, and I thought he'd misspoken, but I think it was actually a deliberate showing.
I remember
of the
that
ankle.
moment, and I think that reflected the fact that Jeremy has been chairing these meetings with leader of the SNP, leader of the Lib Dems, who else is there? Caroline Lucas, Plaid. The grouping, which are, not the DUP or the Tories. And I think that basically what's happened is that they've come to a bit of an understanding that they were needed for this vote of no confidence, which of course then went the other way.
They've come to a bit of an understanding, but what it's done is actually sell out unionists in Scotland and sell out Brexit voters in this country, millions of them. The Labour Party on both fronts, on both referendum questions, are selling out their own electorate.
Not at all, because they're going to be able to choose.
Let me hear from Gillian first.
I'm just being polite because it said on the way in that you're not to talk over anybody. But I agree with the threat that Darren actually raised, which, is this sort of double referendum. But it is worth remembering that actually more people voted to leave in Scotland than actually voted for the SNP, even in terms of absolute numbers. And, when people talk about what... I was sat on a panel talking about the deal, Boris's new deal, which, people didn't think he'd get, and he has gone and got this deal. And on one side, the Scots were lamenting how, it was very unfair for them because it was a brilliant deal for Ireland, but it was terrible for Scottish businesses. And then the Irish were saying that it was a terrible deal for them and they didn't want it. And I thought, and the reason is everybody was picking out what they wanted to of the transition and almost deliberately being disingenuous, pretending that the transition is the end point. And to answer the question of where we end up with the union, it will really, in my view, depend on how well we manage moving from the transition to the free trade agreement and how well we do that, taking along those nations and those, particular nations' concerns with us. Because I think it is important that when we get the free trade agreement, it works for the whole of the United Kingdom. Okay. Otherwise, it will add pressure.
Is the absence of Ruth Davidson going to kill the Tories in Scotland?
I hope not, because I have loved my Scottish colleagues coming in. First of all, it's been a counterbalance for the SNP, and they're absolutely brilliant. There's 13 of them. They've really brought a different perspective that we haven't had in Parliament before, and so I very much hope
you
that
hope,
we
but
keep
what do you
some of them.
fear?
Well, I was actually talking to a Labour peer who is Scottish, because it's very difficult to judge Scottish politics. They're extremely volatile. I mean, Labour used to be the biggest party there for decades. In fact, took it probably totally for granted that you got these kind of free 50-odd seats. And now, actually, it's difficult to win an election probably for you without them. It's very volatile. It's difficult for us to tell down here. But I was talking to this Labour peer, and he said he thought the Conservatives were actually going to do well. He thought that actually, the talk here had been overestimated about the SNP. I mean, of course, all the talk here is the SNP talking about the SNP. And as Darren said, Nicola Sturgeon does often sort of kind of make out she speaks for the whole of Scotland, and she does have a bigger platform probably than most people. It's awful for us that Ruth's taken some time out with her baby, but I hope she'll be back someday. But there are some very strong Scottish MPs, and I do hope that
I find it interesting that this personalising, the Corbyn is this devil. Now Nicola Sturgeon becomes the second devil. Can't people actually
They're all
understand?
your words, nobody else's.
No, the way they're presenting.
that?
I mean, I feel the devilising. Darren certainly. The minute and Boris Johnson in the Telegraph today. The Telegraph today, comparing him to Stalin. I'm not a Corbyn fan, but really.
It's a metaphor, wasn't it? Are we not allowed to use metaphors anymore?
It was over the top.
It was completely wrong and really insulting, and it is creating a devil out of this person, right? I think
they're all equally devils now. Then, so we've had. I mean, you've said they're all devils. So
I haven't said that.
Maybe it's just the way politicians are viewed.
I admire Nicola Sturgeon hugely, actually, and I also thought Ruth Davidson was rather good at the job, and I don't think it was the baby, by the way, that she left for. I think some people didn't like the leadership, the way the leader was elected.
She made clear that was not the case.
Yeah.
And she also made clear it was about her baby. But maybe
there is a bit of inconsistency here, Darren, on your side of the argument, because if you believe that a country should be allowed to be independent and go its own way, how can a Brexiteer then deny the Scottish people the same opportunity that the UK people have had?
I do actually agree with Catherine that in 2021, where if they do actually, Holyrood says, listen, we are putting forward proposals, then Boris will have to give them a second referendum.
But why wait till 2021? They were elected on that manifesto in the last Scottish elections by quite a considerable margin, and in their manifesto it said they wanted a second referendum. So why delay it till then?
Because that Parliament is accountable to Scotland, right? To the people of Scotland. They deal with those domestic issues in Scotland. It's not an issue for this general election, in my opinion.
Well, it's an issue for this government or whoever forms the next government, because Nicola Sturgeon is going to come a-knocking and they're going to have to give her an answer.
Only if she thinks she'll win.
Well, the polls are 50-50 at the moment, which is more than they were before the last referendum. So my contention would be it would actually almost be immoral to deny Scotland that referendum. If the manifesto I can't remember what year was the last Scottish parliamentary elections, 2016, it was quite clear, said we want another referendum. They were elected on that. They formed the government. If they get a good result in this election, that would back that up. I don't see the point in waiting till 2021. But,
minority government.
Only just. But I mean, it's been passed by the Scottish
Darren,
Parliament.
can I just slight mistake, I think, when you said Boris will do this in 2021 or whenever. We don't know it's going to be Boris. Yeah. We're in the middle of an election. Can we just hold our breath on that? It would be good.
Well, I hope you come visit me in my gulag then, Yasmin.
There won't be a gulag.
0345 6060 973, and we'll all be re-educating everybody on LBC. It's 8:31. Zora Suleiman has the news headlines.
Boris Johnson says his frustration over delaying Brexit left him wanting to chew his own tie. It's as campaigning for the general election got underway today. The Prime Minister says he didn't want to call one, but it's the only way to leave the EU. Meanwhile, Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn called the election a once-in-a-generation chance to transform the country, and the Liberal Democrats want to cancel Brexit altogether. Emergency services are at Piccadilly Theatre in London's West End after reports the ceiling collapsed. Several people attending a performance of Death of a Salesman have minor injuries. It happened just before 8 this evening, and it's emerged the injuries suffered by Harry Dunn, the teenager killed in a crash outside a US airbase in Northamptonshire, weren't initially classed as life-threatening. Paramedics took 43 minutes to reach him, but would have been with him within 7 if his injuries were logged as the most serious. LBC weather will rain moving northeastwards across England and Wales through the night. Showers in Scotland with a low of 1 degree. Rain for most of the UK tomorrow with a high of 10 degrees.
Election 2019. Continuous coverage on LBC.
London's air pollution affects every borough and everyone's health, especially children. The main cause? Road transport. The Mayor and TfL are working to clean up London's buses and taxis, but there are things we can all do as well. By swapping just one car trip every week for walking, cycling or public transport, we can help make London's air cleaner together for everyone. See how the Mayor and TfL are working towards cleaner air. Sign up to do your bit and swap that trip at lbc.co.uk.
I'm sorry, you have progressive memory loss.
When you hear these words, the outlook is bleak, but we're working to change that. We're Recognition Health, the brain and mind experts, and we're running clinical studies in London and Guildford. If you volunteer, you'll receive free access to a new generation medication, as well as comprehensive medical care. With your help, we can change the future of MCI, as in mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease.
You have progressive memory loss. But here's what we can do.
To find out more about Recognition Health and taking part, go to brainandmindexperts.com.
Alan from Bolton was persuaded by his bank to put his savings into an investment bond, which then lost money. Luckily, Alan contacted Goodwin Barrett, who helped him claim back £15,500. If a bank or financial advisor persuaded you to buy an ISA, unit trust or investment bond and you lost money, then Goodwin Barrett may be able to help. To discover how much you could be owed, text GOOD to 60777. Text GOOD to 60777 now.
The Mazda sale means this autumn there's no time like the present, and there's no present like a brand new Mazda. And now there's an additional £500 off our entire range of cars. So if you want an award-winning Mazda, the time is now. Visit your local Mazda dealer or search Mazda sale. £500 Mazda sale savings available on new vehicles registered between the 21st of October and 30th of November 2019. Subject to availability at participating dealers, retail sales only, T's and C's apply.
At Esso, you can earn double Nectar points when you spend £5 or more on shop items. Esso Nectar, helping fuel your everyday. See esso.co.uk for exclusions.
You're in leakage, you're in leakage.
Tenna Men. Pants and pads. Buy online or in shops. Tenna Men. Keep control.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
It's 8:35 here on LBC. This is from Gary, who says, I'm so disappointed in you, Iain. You have guests waffling on about Scotland and you have no voice of local representation. I find your guests embarrassingly ignorant about Scotland when I hear them talking poor journalism. Well, we did have Tommy Shepherd from the SNP on last week, and we do have Scottish voices on, but we try and balance our panels from all over the United Kingdom, but we happen to be talking about Scotland. I am a quarter Scottish. I'm the token Scottish representative. Oh, Catherine, you are a bit,
and
are
if
you?
Scotland becomes independent, I could qualify for a Scottish passport.
Could you? Well,
and I've got a bit Scottish as well. Grandmother's a Macmillan.
Yasmin, any?
I just fancy Nicola Sturgeon. I said that.
Really?
Yeah, I had homoerotic feelings about
This
her.
is a revelation.
I told her, and she
you?
said, I like you too.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
well, I don't know where this
anything could
conversation
happen.
might go from
Anything
here.
could happen.
Darren, do you fancy Nicola Sturgeon?
I don't know. I can safely say I do not. No.
Let me reintroduce my panel to you.
Now.
Well, this is very different from the last panel we were on, Gillian, isn't it?
Is.
Catherine West is from the Labour Party. Darren Grimes is a Brexit campaigner. Yasmin Alibhai-Brown is from the Tommy Two Ways Party, and Gillian Keegan is from the Conservative Party. It's a Giles Brandreth expression for being a bit bi.
Oh, that's politically or?
Well, let's not even go there.
Try then.
Right, I think we should go on to another question. Jane is from Liverpool. Hello, Jane.
Hi. My question is, can a private provider never deliver a superior or even good service to the NHS? Is private always bad, and why?
Gillian Keegan.
Well, hello, and I'm also from Liverpool, so it's nice to hear
her
it.
accent's going to come out now.
Yeah, the accent will come out. So this conversation about the privatisation of the NHS is ridiculous. So it comes out kind of every single time, and I don't get it. So if you look at the NHS is the largest healthcare company in the world, and it's the 5th largest organisation in the world after the Chinese Army, the US Army, Walmart, and McDonald's. It's got over 1 million people. And nobody's picking up the bill for that apart from the British taxpayer. There is no way this is privatised. 93%, almost, 92.7% of every penny spent on it, which is nearly 130 billion and will go up to 150 billion, nearly 93% of it is the public sector. 7.3% of it is the private sector, which includes doctors, dentists, Macmillan nurses, charities, drugs companies, MRI scanners, and all the things the NHS don't make. Unless the NHS is considering going into everything from filing cabinets to drugs. First of all, they will not get the best innovation if they just create everything themselves. You want the best that's available all across the world. We you know, these discussions that were ongoing that have kind of given some potential kind of, I don't know, basis to this rumour, which is complete nonsense. Were, for example, some discussions about the drug Orkambi and the other derivatives of Orkambi, which is a US based pharmaceutical company that the NHS have been negotiating with, trying to get the price at the right level so that we can offer it to children and adults with cystic fibrosis. And that is now done. You will need to buy drugs from wherever they are available, the best drugs to treat people who have very serious diseases, and having a conversation about whether it should be public or private money. The NHS are in the best place to make those decisions with NHS England, with NICE, and they have all of the biggest drug procurer in the world, by the way, which is why they get the best prices. And of course, this discussion about the US trade agreement, they want our prices. They've always wanted our prices, but we buy more. That's why they don't get our prices.
We had Chris Hobson from NHS providers yesterday warning politicians of all parties not to weaponise the NHS as an election issue. Now, you agree with him, but we've had the Labour Party doing what they generally do in a general election, 24 hours to save the NHS and all of that. But we've also twice today had the Prime Minister of this country saying that there are going to be 40 new hospitals in this country, when we all know that there's going to be 6.
There's going to be 6 new hospitals. And then
so why did he say 40? Because that's weaponising the issue, isn't it?
I don't think it's... So the truth is, and I'm actually the PPS to Matt Hancock, so I've been going through all these plans. So there are 6 named hospitals shovel ready, which they're actually starting to build. There are 34 that have been given the money to get themselves to that point,
but
and they're
not
all named.
New hospitals, are they?
Some of them are new hospitals, some of them are new units. It depends what they need. But
he's wrong to say that it's 40 new hospitals. That is, to coin a phrase, a lie.
Well, you could say there's 6 new hospitals which will be built straight away, 34 which will be built over the next 10 years. Some of them will be new wings of this and new. You could say that.
But a new wing is not a new hospital.
Actually, the vast majority of these hospitals are replacing the vast majority of the hospitals. So they're very old Victorian hospitals, like you've seen being done before. The biggest difference actually between what we're doing and what Labour have done when they've replaced hospitals is we're not using PFI to finance it, because that causes a terrible financial difficulties for all of the trusts afterwards.
Yasmin, public good, private bad, and never the twain shall meet. That seems to be the mantra when we talk about health policy.
There is a lot of evidence coming through that there are plans, and we've had, I can't remember who the doctors are and the investigative journalists who have said this, that after Brexit in the United States, including for Trump, there is an expectation that the private businesses in the United States want a slice of this cake. I don't blame them. That's what they do. But I do not want... What we have now is fine, the balance of dentistry, pharmacies and all of that. It's true, right from the very beginning. The private...
And he said,
hang on, you've had a long time
I know,
speaking.
but he said it's not on the table. He said it, Donald Trump said it.
Whatever Boris says, I do not believe. I'm sorry. There's too much evidence.
I'll say it. It's not on the table. The British people wouldn't allow it to be on the table.
Well,
it's not acceptable.
They can say all sorts of things like the 40 hospitals. So the danger is not what we've got, which was actually there from the very beginning. When Bevan set it up, GPs demanded that they wanted to be private contractors. We know that. It's if the balance changes and these big businesses, and I have a friend who is a doctor and a businesswoman in America, and she's told me that in their industry, the talk is the opportunities that lie here.
But they sell to us already.
And I don't want that to happen. I think many of us don't want that.
The cystic fibrosis drug is produced by an American company.
They sell to us
under John McDonnell's plans, he was sitting in that chair last night. Under his plans, we wouldn't be able to buy that.
Well, I'm not
or
John
anything else
McDonnell,
that's innovative.
No,
but
I'm not saying you are.
Pharmaceutical companies have always had this tension between how much they charge and want to make. That's not new. That's really not new. Yeah, I worked as a consultant for a pharma company, and this was constantly being discussed.
Catherine.
Iain, thank you. The any willing provider provision within the Health and Social Care Act, which the Lib Dems pushed through with the Tories in 2012, that did open up a lot of services to the private companies, and we've seen... We've seen Virgin, for example, suing the government because they didn't get a particular thing that they wanted. And I think that's what people don't like, because they can see that there have been a lot of cutbacks in the NHS, and then when they go in, they see that the private provider giving the food, actually the food's not very nice. They see the private cleaners who clean the hospitals, actually the hospitals aren't very clean. And then they see that the likes of the Virgin companies trying to get money out of the public purse. I mean, it's an absolute disgrace. That's the kind of thing that they want to stop. And most people who work in the NHS say that Andrew Lansley's health reforms in 2012 have been an absolute disaster. And that's the kind of thing that people don't like, because I think people accept if, like, for example, our telephone system. I don't think there's going to be a mass nationalisation of your mobile phone, because on the whole...
I'm glad you've ruled that out.
On the whole, phone companies have worked. However, if you look at healthcare, it is the one thing which is so precious about the NHS, and the other thing is the database, because you've got that level of DNA and the longevity and the longitudinal studies within the NHS, which make it really ripe for the private companies to do their research. And that's where I think there's a real interest from the US, and I think we know that. And I've met the trade, I was on the Trade Select Committee, and I've met the trade negotiators in the US, and they would eat us for dinner.
You haven't seen the IT in the NHS.
I just think that this is the height of irresponsibleness. I cannot believe that we have politicians telling people that asking them, will you be able to afford to pay your medical bills? Actually putting forward to them prospect of the NHS being sold off and them being left without the prospect of actually receiving access to medication, etc. That is never going to happen. We have, through our membership of the EU, a deeper trade agreement with the EU, with other EU countries, than we ever would with America through a free trade agreement. We are in the single market. Guess who has private healthcare? The European Union, in the likes of Germany, in the likes of other
contributory. It's not private, it's contributory.
It's not the US model.
It is a mixed
really
model.
Not
it is
the
a mixed
US model.
First of all, he never said it was.
No. It is a mixed model. It offers private healthcare. They do have private provision, but they are mixed models. So you are saying, why has Germany not bought the NHS? Why have all of these other countries around Europe not bought the NHS? Because the NHS is not for sale, and you are scaring people. And I think that is deeply irresponsible.
It's a deflection tactic, because they've got nothing to say on Brexit. It's a deflection tactic, and it's very poor politics, to be honest, and it's disingenuous.
So Yasmin, you just admitted you're scaring people. Why would you want to do that?
Because it's a real threat.
It's not.
I think it's a real threat. It's a real threat. The National Health Service. You know what I'd really like to know? And this is a question I put to them now. I'd like to know how many members of our cabinet use the National Health Service. Can we please have an answer to that?
It'll be everybody, because every MP has no private health.
We ask this question about education all the time.
Yeah.
Who sends their child to private schools and who's... I want to know, in this cabinet, which has apparently, I don't know if it's absolutely true, but I've been told, more millionaires than we've ever had.
I think that was Theresa May's cabinet, not Boris Johnson's, actually.
How many of them actually use the service?
Why shouldn't people use private healthcare? I use private healthcare and the NHS.
I want to know how many cabinet
ministers... Why do you want to know? Just
because I think that
you want
it's
to
an
promote
investment.
envy?
No. If you use the National Health Service and you understand
everyone uses the National Health Service, whether they've got private health or not.
I bet Boris Johnson doesn't.
I bet if he breaks his leg, he goes to A&E. He does.
Well, wait.
You don't have a choice.
I mean, it is. I mean, Yasmin, to say that you deliberately want to scare people when you know full well that any British government, whether it's a Labour government or a Conservative government, has the choice of not signing a trade agreement if they don't like the terms, because it has to work for both sides.
Yes, and the reason why they're doing this, they're calling it, don't politicise the National Health Service, don't do this, let's not talk about the National Health Service.
The NHS
we all love
saying
it. It's because that's their weak point. We know.
But why are they ahead of Labour at the moment in terms of people's approval rating of
don't
parties
talk to me
on the
about,
NHS?
You know, I'm going to wait for the result.
It's an inconvenient argument for you, isn't it?
What?
Because if you look at all the surveys in recent weeks, in recent months, the Conservatives are just a little bit ahead of the Labour Party on the NHS. So that rather destroys your argument.
And two-thirds of its life, it's been under Conservative governments, not Labour. Yes, it's true.
It is true.
And you know, all of these scare stories have come out. 71 years it's been going. Two-thirds of its life it's been under the Conservative stewardship. And, you know, it's complete nonsense, and I think it's a deflection
Catherine,
tactic
you've been
now.
quite quiet.
Yeah, I feel that the thing is, we can say all we like, but the reason it works out there and the reason that we talk about it as Labour people is that people are really worried. The NHS is on its neck. Hang on,
You
Gillian.
make them worried.
Just let me finish. If you have, a child with a mental health problem, if you have a learning disabled relative, if your elderly mother is in hospital, you are seeing some terrible things. I mean, 1 in 3 nurses in geriatric wards in London hospitals is new on shift tonight, learning from the other nurses. Where's the toilet? Where do I get a drink of water? All those things. Are they thinking about the patients? Well, they're thinking about their first night on. There's a 30% vacancy rate. There's a 43% vacancy rate for consultants in the NHS.
Still the world's biggest
NHS is on its knees. People cannot get a GP appointment at primary care level.
1.3 million employees.
Our vaccination rate is dropping because we've cut out all of the education. Do I need to go on?
It's got
this is why it works, because the Tory government has run it down and down and down.
No. I'm 4 minutes late for a break, Yasmin. Just indulge me, please. Because we want to get one more question in at least. You're listening to LBC's Cross Question, where I'm rapidly losing control. It's 8:49.
Eddie Mair, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m.
Never mind the politicians. What do you care about most? What this election's about for you? Brexit, says Brian. Ban diesel vehicles from 2025, says Anthony. Climate change, public transport and the NHS, says someone else. Transparency. Without transparency and combating corruption, you will achieve nothing. What's most important to you in this election?
Eddie Mair, Monday to Friday from 4 p.m. LBC.
Credit limit of up to £1,500. What do you have to do to get it? Simple. Get online and check if you're eligible for an Ocean credit card in minutes without affecting your credit score. For your Ocean credit card, visit ocean.co.uk now and get all that from Ocean. Intelligent Lending Limited is a credit broker. Capital One, the exclusive lender. Representative 39.9% APR variable. Borrow and spend responsibly.
For many sufferers of complex regional pain syndrome, life can be a living hell. If this is you, St Pancras Clinical Research would like to hear from you. We are conducting a new clinical research trial for CRPS at our Comfortable Clinic in central London. For more information, please go to stpancrasclinicalresearch.com. That's stpancrasclinicalresearch.com.
Antibiotics, we're wonderful pills, but don't ever think we'll cure all of your ills. So every time you feel a bit under the weather, don't always think that we can make you better. Take us for the wrong thing, that's dangerous to do. When you really need us, we can stop working for you. So please don't end up paying the price. Always take your doctor's advice.
Taking antibiotics when you don't need them puts you and your family at risk. Take your doctor or nurse's advice and keep antibiotics working.
My name's Luke. I live in Dunstable with my wife and 4 daughters. We've got a Ring doorbell too out the front. Every time there's someone who comes up to the door, it notifies my phone, and then I can actually see if there's anyone dodgy at the door. A while ago, we had an incident at the house. My wife and I was in bed about 1:30 in the morning. We got a notification on my Ring app on my phone. So I looked on the actual video itself and it showed me that he was trying to get underneath the mat to see if there was a key there so we can actually get into the house. The video clip allowed the police to see exactly who was in front of the camera and where that person was touching the door. And that allowed the crime scene technician to dust for prints. Thanks to the video clip and his fingerprints, that was enough to convict him. The most important thing for me is when I'm not here during the night, I need to know that the family's safe, and Ring Doorbell does that.
Join Luke and the millions of people protecting their homes with Ring. Learn more at ring.com.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8 minutes to 9 here on LBC. Catherine West, Darren Grimes, Gillian, Keegan, Yasmin, Alibhai-Brown with me for the next few minutes to answer your questions. Catherine in Romford, what would you like to ask?
Hi, good evening.
Hello.
I would like to ask the panel, especially Darren though, do you have full confidence in the electoral process?
I wonder why you should want to ask Darren. Okay, well,
Talk about postal votes and the impartiality of the Electoral Commission.
All right. Well, Darren, we haven't got 2 hours for you to answer this question, but very briefly, do you have, after your experience, which I suppose we should say that the Electoral Commission took you to court, you won, you were acquitted. Do you have confidence in the electoral process?
No, I don't, funnily enough. I was personally put through 3 investigations, no 3 different to the one before, just the third one was opened after significant pressure from very wealthy Remain campaigners. How can it be right in a democracy that those with more cash than their opponents can apply pressure to this supposedly independent quango and force investigations? I think we need a rethink on our electoral law rules and of the regulator itself.
What about postal votes? Because that seems to be the big thing at the moment, that people question the whole system of postal votes. When I was your age, you could only get a postal vote if you could prove that you were going on holiday.
Well, I think that we should go back to that. If you can't be bothered to get off your bum and go to the go vote, it's open all day long, then to me that's, you know, or if you can't actually get out of the house, to nominate someone to go do it for you, because it is open to abuse. And I actually welcome the ID laws that we've brought in under this government.
Oh, they're dreadful, because lots of people don't have a passport or a driver's licence, so it's going to stop a lot of people from voting.
They get a national ID card, don't they, under these new rules?
I'm completely against it, because I think our turnout is so low, and for someone who's volunteered in elections, and all of them local council by-elections, where you get 20% turnout, trying to push people to the polls, let's make it easier for people rather than making it more difficult.
But that has been brought in Northern Ireland, hasn't it? And it hasn't affected turnout levels. So in fact, they've come back to where they were, and they have a system where if you haven't got a passport or a driving licence, you can bring 2 other forms of ID, or you can get a free ID card from the local electoral registration office.
My general sort of instinct is that it will suppress voter turnout. That's my general feeling.
But in Northern Ireland, it hasn't. That it's actually been trialled there.
But I know from having done the hard yards, I'm not somebody who just sort of got parachuted into Parliament. I have done loads of elections, and I know particularly in inner city areas, a lot of people don't have the ID required, and I think trying to encourage them, and I think postal votes are fine, provided there's nobody, doing anything. And most people I have met running elections from whatever party have been very honest, people who really enjoy democracy. I haven't seen myself
but how
anything.
Do you check
I'm
that?
not saying that it doesn't exist, but I just think that so many people who actually tramp the streets, and I always say, if I get an opportunity on polling night, I just say I want to thank everybody, regardless of party, for being involved in this election, because every election has a life of its own. It's like a show. Sure. And I just think I've never met anybody who thought that by doing something questionable around either a postal ballot or something else, they were going to get one up on
There were students bragging, though, weren't there, about voting twice they were supporters of Momentum, who were saying they were going and actually sign up at home and your student address so you can vote twice. This is clearly open to abuse, isn't it?
Well, I wonder how many of them have actually done what I've done, which is go out in the snow and the ice and go up the stairs in the 10th floor of the council block and say, would you like to come and vote now? The polls are closing in 2 hours. And I think we have to be realistic, that we have to make it easier for people.
Okay, Gillian.
Well, actually, I think in terms of ID, I've long been having the thought that we're getting to the point now with digital scamming, with what happens on the internet, that actually probably we'd protect citizens more if we did have some kind of ID. And I think the balance is tipping now. I mean, we're going to hear all about how, Russia's interfering in potentially our election, as well as France and the US and many others. So I think, and also Facebook now, we can have targeted ads down to an individual person that nobody else sees to verify whether anything there is truthful or not. So the whole thing is changing, and I just feel like we're in a very old-fashioned world. And
what about this doctored video that the Conservatives put out today with Keir Starmer? I mean, that was something that I can't imagine you would agree with.
No, I don't. And actually, Keir has trouble enough answering his position on Brexit. It's a very convoluted position, and it's kind of gone on a journey. So I don't know why they needed to do it. I mean, they put the whole video out showing the whole thing as it was. It was supposed to be something apparently that was supposed to be quite funny. Well, it didn't. It's kind of rebounded. Yes, I honestly think politics is funny enough without making it up. To be honest,
I don't think it was funny. I was deliberately done to. It was actually I even agreed with Piers Morgan today.
No, steps back in amazement.
I know. First time ever, I thought, good on you, mate, because he called it out.
He said calls everyone out.
No, he called this out properly, saying this is faking. This is what should never be done, which is taking something and obviously creating an impression which was a fake.
They put the full one out as well.
Nobody
I don't think they meant to be fake.
Only after, I think.
No, they put the full one out first. Yeah, so they told me. To be honest, I never looked at it.
Cleverly, who's not clever, and I'm not the only one who's saying that, was awful, actually.
He says such nice things about you.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sure. But there is this problem with the ID, this photo ID, of course, which I think David Lammy and others have brought up, that minorities and certain groups fear that this is a way of excluding them. And we need to, you can't just pass a rule without proper investigation.
Why would it exclude minorities?
Because this is what's happened apparently in parts of the US, where some kinds of photo ID were used deliberately to keep out black voters. And there is that conversation beginning to happen here. I don't know whether it's true or not.
I've never heard anyone say they want to keep black voters out.
No. I'm saying that conversation has started here.
Has it? Who
yes.
with? I've never heard
in the papers and in the news and in letters to the papers and so on, that this is deliberately being done to edit out some voters. I don't know whether it's true or not, but you can't just pass something new without a proper discussion.
Right. Let's go to a final text from Lottie in Hayes, who says, Ian, I've just read that James Dean is to be resurrected for a new Vietnam War drama. Rights have been acquired to digitally reanimate him. He died in 1955, so he can star in his fourth movie. So I asked the panel, if you could bring one historical figure back to life, who would it be and why? Darren.
I would bring back Peter Shaw, or the late Lord Shaw, because actually, and he's a Labour politician, so believe it or not, people will be surprised to hear me say that. I think he gave the best speech in favour of Euroscepticism, or a Eurosceptic speech, that I've ever heard in 1975. It had hair standing up on the back of my neck. And actually,
how old were you then? 3?
I watched it. On
YouTube.
He was born. When were you born?
I was born in 93.
Okay, I'm just listening. I thought, how did that happen?
Thank you. Really good plastic surgery. And yes, it was this back then. People actually believed in this country and believed in the communities that they represented. And I think actually Britain would be better off if they had those politicians.
Peter Shaw has one vote. Catherine.
John Smith. I came into Parliament, into politics around, 98, just after Tony Blair was elected, and it was a moment of huge optimism, and it was just a very exciting time. But if you rewind just a little bit, I think it was the John Smith values and so on which really drove a lot of the activists at the time. You probably met him, Yasmin, but I would have liked to have met him because I think it was a golden time for Labour.
I edited a book of his speeches called Guiding Light.
I'll make sure I get a copy, and you'll have to sign it for me, Ian.
Way out of print. I imagine I should look on Amazon in a minute, but I imagine they're probably £100 now. Yasmin.
I'm not going to be political.
For once.
I'd bring my mum back, but that's always been the case. John Lennon. I want John Lennon back.
You're just currying favour with Gillian, who comes from Liverpool, aren't you?
Yeah.
Oh, I love John Lennon.
OK, Gillian?
I would agree with John Lennon, but I think actually after this conversation I'd bring Nye Bevan back and ask him whether the vision that he had, and others at the time, for the NHS over 71 years, I'd take him round some of our new hospitals and I'd ask him whether it's exceeded his expectations or not. I have a feeling he'd be delighted at seeing where our NHS is and how it's revolutionised healthcare in this country. And perhaps he could put an end to it being used as a political football.
Well, that's a positive way to end the programme. Thank you all very much. Catherine West, Darren Grimes, Gillian Keegan and Yasmin Alibhai-Brown. Tomorrow at 8 o'clock on the programme, we'll be spending an hour with Chuka Umunna, the Liberal Democrat Foreign Affairs spokesman, and you'll be able to put your questions to him as well. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 9:02.
On your radio, on Global Player, and